All right, everyone. Welcome once again to the Faces of Business. I am your host, Damon Postolka, and I am excited for our guest today because we have Glenn Poulos with us today. He is a salesperson extraordinary, co-founder of several companies, currently with NWS formerly Gap Wireless, I believe. You're going to explain this a lot better with us, though, today, Glenn. And we're talking about effective sales and maximizing value during, before, and all the way through an exit. Glenn, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Damon. It's great to be here.
Well, Glenn, you got into this a little while ago. So I have to kind of ask as we start out.
Yeah.
Let's hear a little bit about your background and how you really decided that sales was your thing.
Good. Yeah, this is a good one, and it kind of gets asked a lot. And hopefully I always give the same answer. But the funny thing is, I started working for the Canadian government, and I was a civil servant, and I went to school for electronics. They hired me out of school, and worked on weather stations, and I was fixing electronic gizmos for them. And then I went to work at their Environment Canada in Toronto. And my boss, who was a former military guy who had retired and then got a job, they have a funny name for it when I think like 20 and 20 they call it or something, where they do get two sort of government pensions. And he pulls me aside and he goes, "Dude, you got to get out of the government. You're in the wrong field." And I was a kid. I was 20 something, right? And I didn't know what he was talking about, but I actually took him at his word, and he said, "You should go into sales." And so I got a job in technical sales, right? Selling, high value electronic measuring instruments and things like that. And never looked back, and been in sales ever since. So that was 1985. So coming up on 40 years.
Wow. So what do you like most about this, being a sales professional?
Well, the money, of course, right?
That's a good part of it.
What else?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, like, people, I try to explain to people, especially, I meet lots of people, young fellows and girls as well. But I mean, where maybe, they're not, they're not destined for, a 15-year medical degree with, and to become a surgeon or something, that can make, really good money. But I'm like, you can get a 15-year head start on them in sales. If you learn your products, if you're passionate about it, if you join the right company, you can be making what a surgeon makes in a couple of years in, right?
Yeah.
And you can always be at the cutting edge. You can always be learning new technology or new whatever you're selling, right? And so you're not selling yesterday's stuff. And it's one of the only real careers that allows that, other than maybe professional sports or entertainment or something where, you've got some kind of a natural God-given talent. And and so that's what I like about it is the what I always talk about and explain to people is the power of leverage, right?
Yep. And as you're did you freeze up there for a second?
No.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
So the power of leverage. Talk about that a little bit. The power of
leverage.
So
it's easier. Yeah. So what leverage isn't, it's easier to explain. So, like you graduate with a, business degree or something, and you go and work for, like, I don't know, GE or someone, and, you get a job in one of their business departments. They paying you $55,000 a year. And then all of a sudden you look at the pay scales and you think, well, geez, I can be a department manager in 5 years, and I'll be at 60,000, then 62. And, and basically you can kind of map out where you're going to go. And 1 in a million might go to become the CEO of a public company. But I mean, you kind of go through the ranks and you know where you're going to start. You kind of figure out where you're going to end. Yeah. And I mean, especially at the Canadian government, I knew exactly, like, there were certain levels. There was I was an EL4 when I went in. I knew that when I left 20 years later, I'd probably be a 6. The 7s were like, there's only a handful in Canada, so I probably was 6, right? And then the top of the 6 was X amount of dollars, whatever it was, and I would get my best 3 years out of those, and that was my life, right?
Yeah,
no leverage in that, right? But I mean, if when I went into sales, I realized like if I can sell more, if I can make more calls, I can lever up my my earnings and my income, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of like a bit of a trick, or and the other thing is that sales, if as you plan your territory and your business in sales and the job that you're in, sales can occur when you're maybe not present as well. There's repeat sales, there's recurring revenue, repeat revenue, there's the hunter killer stuff where you get to eat what you kill. But so there's the leverage that over time, like insurance is a perfect example, right? You start with nothing, but in the end your book of business is like very, very lucrative. And that's why people go into selling insurance, right? Because people often wonder why you'd want to subject yourself to that, right?
Yes.
And because of what happens over time, because those customers typically stick around for life, and you can lever up. And then the final aspect is what I learned 5 years into the business was if you can own the sales company, you can leverage yourself and everyone else selling in the business. And every time they sell, you get paid. Every time you sell, you get paid, right? Every time anyone sells, you get paid. And that's the maximum, sort of way of applying leverage.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great point. I'm glad you explained it, because your first point is if you sell more as a salesperson, you're worth more. I mean, that's I can be a greatest engineer in the world, but I'm only worth so much. I could be the best, whatever.
Right.
I'm only worth so much. But if I continue to sell more, I'm more valuable to that company.
That's right. Yeah.
That is a good thing. And I with a spouse was a 30 plus year salesperson, I understand that pretty well, and the drive behind it.
Right.
So you're out there, you're doing these sales, you're in these companies, founded companies, but what really you've made a little bit of switch, and you really are also a sales coach and author. I mean, in addition to being a business owner, what really drove you out to do that and gave you that initiative to go, well, it's not enough that I'm trying to, build a business. I need to do this other stuff too.
Yeah. So the progression of how it occurred was, one, I started as a salesperson. Then I started my first company, sold it 15 years later, started my next sales company, sold it 15 years later. But towards when I was preparing to sell the second business, it was the pandemic. But during those last 30 years before that, I had been learning lessons from all my mentors, and especially early on when I was spending a lot of time making calls, because as I became an owner of a business, I mean, I had more salespeople than myself, but and then I started learning really, really good rules, right? And so back in the 80s, early 90s, I started writing them down, and I would name them after people. And oftentimes they were rules: do this, don't do that, definitely don't do that, right? And I would often, call it like the Tony factor or whatever, right? Something like that, right? It's like, don't do that, and or don't do a Quigley on them. And these were all things that once I explained these rules to people, I could just say, don't do a Quigley, and they would all know exactly what I meant, right?
Yeah.
I didn't have to say anything else, right?
Yeah.
And so people would often laugh at some of these, right? They're like, oh my God, that makes so much sense or whatever. And because I was tying it to a funny story, giving it a name, so they would say, oh, eventually it was like, can you come to my company and tell some of these funny stories at our next sales meeting, right? And so I would do that. And then they're like, oh, you should write a book, right? And of course, I was too lazy to do that. And I never really did until the pandemic. And then I didn't have anything else to do because in Canada, we had a long lockdown, right? And so I thought, you know what, I was going to give it that's when I decided to give it the college try. And I had this book that I had kept where I just constantly writing them down, almost like the punchlines of the rules. And then if there was a attribution or to someone or something, I would write that down. And it wasn't the whole explanation of it. It was just sort of the punchline or the lesson learned or whatever. Right. And I was able to take them all and expand on them and come up with the book and the 57 tips on how to build a career in sales and business. And that's how the book sort of came about. And then in the latter years, I joined some leadership groups and like the tech group and the EO and PEO and people, these often like CEO groups or sales groups, right, where you kind of have like this group of mentors. You go every month and you have these meetings and stuff, right? And often I would hear these scenarios of problems and of course, being the general manager of the business, not just the sales manager or salesman, right? I mean, I often reflect on many things, but where it really resonated was when they would talk to me about the structure of their sales team, the compensation, how they were measuring people, what they were putting up with. And then, I basically started helping, people and so I'm not really selling any courses or anything like that, but just through word of mouth and associations, I've gone in to help people to restructure parts of their business and to, clean it up in some cases because they're selling the business, or in some cases they just bought the business, or they're just struggling, and these are just more because I have a day job. These are just more part-time, point and shoot kind of opportunities where I would help people for a while, and but it's definitely not my day job, and it's just a little passion project. And I get to talk about the rules. I get to talk about the book. I get to, I get to learn about some, I'm typically, some of the businesses are kind of cool to me and fun to be around. Right. And I'm actually amazed at some of the businesses some of these people have built, and I'm, enamored by it. I'm sometimes a bit jealous and or whatever, and I'm thinking, wow, like you have done an amazing job of this or this, but I can help you with that. Right. And,
What's the most interesting type of thing you've had to sell or help them sell?
Well, that's easy for me because my my side passion is I'm what I call a charity DJ. Okay. And I've been a DJ since I was 17.
Nice.
And and I'm super, super passionate about it. I love it. And I love it because I just enjoy the music and the time kind of flies by. But I also, I'm super geeky about electronic equipment, right? Especially audio gear and recording, professional sound recording.
Oh, wow.
I've done, I've helped bands record CDs. I've done the front of house for bands to do their sound setups and stuff like that. And so I got to help a guy rebuild his whole sales team for a business that started as about 10 years ago as a wedding DJ, which I've done plenty of that in my day, although I quit that. That's a whole other podcast. But he started as that. And what he grew into is a business that does sound and light and video for those giant conventions where there's 20,000 people at like the Orlando Convention Center, and there's 80 screens that are 100 feet wide, and and he's grown it into a multi-million-dollar business. And I got to see all the technology in the studio that he built for to use in his building that you can rent, and all the equipment, and of course a lot of my fees came in the form of discount equipment for the shows that I do. And which of course are usually for some sort of a charity. So they're for little or no pay. Right. And, and so the fact that I know this guy is handy, but that's probably one of the funnest ones.
That's quite, I mean, those shows like that are really incredible. Now I've been at a few of them in the last handful of years. And I was at one, what was it, last summer? I was at a Walmart something e-commerce thing, and there had to be like 10,000 people there at that show. And when you go into the the main stage speaking events. It's like a concert. In fact, I think it was in one of the places that I've actually been at a concert before in Vegas. And those are so incredible, the putting those together. And now when you look at large corporations, they do those a lot for their sales.
They do. Yeah.
That's cool.
So that was fun. Yeah.
Oh, no doubt. That's so awesome that you're a DJ. So, well, we won't go down the DJ road. we could. But that's so as you're helping these people doing this. What are some of the coolest? So you've got these rules. Tell me the funniest name for your rules, or one that's catchiest name.
Well, so one of the catchiest names is the name of the book, Never Sit in the Lobby, right?
Yep.
And and sometimes people are a little perplexed by what I mean by that, right? And I'm like, well, when you're in the lobby, like, don't sit down, right? Like, be standing up, right? And like, one guy's like, oh, should I sit in my car? And I'm like, no, dude, like, you should show up on time and then stand when you get there, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, well, why does it matter if I'm sitting or standing, right? And and I said, well, let me explain to you. Like, I said, imagine that you're me and I'm only like 5'6", and I'm sitting down and I'm flipping through distracted, and some 6'4" giant senior buyer guy walks out and says, "Are you Glenn?" And I have to like look up at him from this leather couch that I'm sitting on, and I'm distracted, and then I have to rise up. I can't, and I only get part way up the guy, right? And then he's already a foot taller than me, and I'm like, it's just better to be standing and waiting and not distracted, because you end up nowadays you're on your phone all the time, right? So you're like texting the wife, oh yeah, I'll get the bread and milk on the way home, don't worry, and blah, blah, blah. And I'll pick up the kids and I'll do this and I'll do that. And it's just not a good look, right? Yeah. And so all of my rules, and I'll fire off a few more in a second, are about how to act and stay in front of your customer, and to be a pleasure to do business with always. That's it. That's what the book's about. And that's what all the rules are based on. So the first one with the catchy title is Never Sit in the Lobby. So
that's a good one.
Yeah. So the one of the next ones, which is the way the book is, you can just flip to any page and you can start reading rules. You don't have to start at the beginning and go the way through. You can read them in any order, right? And so, but another one, which is, again, and a lot of them have catchy names, is always ask for a mini tour, right? And people are like, what the hell are you talking about, right? What's a tour, right? What's a mini tour? And I go, it's a tour that's mini, right? And meaning it doesn't take 4 hours in the blazing heat on a bus with 40 other people. It's a mini tour. And they're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, you want to try to get behind the lobby door, right? Yeah. And you want to, because that's where you can see, especially if you're selling equipment like I sold, I can see the competitor's equipment, and I can also look on the desk and I can see whose coffee mug he's got. What's the mouse pad that his mouse is on? Yes. What kind of swag is he wearing, carrying, or otherwise prevailing? And if I'm demonstrating some sort of, Acme accelerator or something, and then I realize, wait a minute, he's already got accelerators from brand A, B, or C. And why am I here, right? And then I'm like, oh, I'm probably just here to keep him honest, the one guy honest, right? Mm-hmm. And so you're never going to learn that in the lobby, right? And so, and again, oftentimes people are like, well, they're not going to say yes to a tour all the time or whatever. And I'm like, no, most of the time you're not going to ask. That's why you're not getting the tour. Yes. They're not going to offer you the tour. But if you ask, 90% of the time, they will give you the tour. And if they look kind of weird at you or whatever, then you can give them a couple of my little snappy lines like, oh, don't worry, I won't sell any insurance while I'm in the building, right? Yeah. Or any encyclopedias or something like that, right? The guy laughs or whatever. And then he agrees, okay, I'll give you and you're basically saying, I want to see your new lab, your new building, your new production line, your new warehouse, your new office, your new whatever it is you sell, wherever it goes, that's all you want to see. A mini tour. You don't need the whole building. You don't need the history of the company. Just show me where the stuff's going so I can present in the best light, right? Yeah. And of course, while you're walking down the hall to get to the place you're going, you represent rule number 3, which is never forget a face. And you learn, and that rule, you practice that before you get into the lobby, and you don't want to waste time standing up and getting sore feet. So you are in your car, you pull out your phone, and you go to that customer. And if you've ever called on them before, you bring up the name of every contact that you've ever met, Sally, Bob, Joe, and Sam, and you remember their face.
Yep.
You remember their face. And if you can't remember their face, like Snap, then you go to LinkedIn and you remember their face. And while you're really doing is bringing it from random access memory with a slow seek time to your front memory, right? To your front memory. And so that it's instantaneous. It's like, hi, Bob, hi, Sam, hi, Sally. Because guess who's going to walk by you on the way to the tour, right?
100%.
And this guy who's maybe never met you before is like, holy shit, this guy knows everybody.
Yeah.
And everybody that's walking by is going, oh my God, I haven't seen that guy in 2 years. And he remembers me. Oh, he's such a pleasure to do business with.
Yes.
Right?
That is like golden advice. I can't tell you. I used to, early in my career, I sold molded products. We worked for a family molder. We have multiple facilities across the U.S. And we would go into the big corporations, right? And, they've got the meeting room, little supplier meeting room. And you're like, well, we're in the factory. Can we see where this is used?
Exactly.
And that same thing. You go out and see the factory, you go out and see the product. You look at the boxes to see if they got a name, where they're getting it from. Now that helps you. You look at how they're using them. You talk to the people on the, in our case, we would talk to the people on the production line and go, well, what kind of problems do you have with these parts or whatever they're doing? Because we were going to either against somebody else or build new tooling or whatever it was. It's amazing what you can learn by that walkthrough. And your super gold advice is that being able to say hello to somebody, even one person, would be massive for you to be able to do that on your way in. If you're talking with somebody that doesn't really know you that well.
Right. And I always reinforce it by saying, imagine, like you show up at your kid's soccer game and this lady comes out and says, oh, hey, Glenn, and knows your wife's name and whatever. And you're like, oh shit, I can't remember her fucking name. Pardon my language, right? You know how it feels. And know she knows you don't remember her name. Right.
Yeah.
And it's the most weird, uncomfortable, awkward sort of moment. Right. And it leaves a really negative thing. And remember, you're always trying to be a pleasure to do business with. And that is not a pleasure. That is a pain. Right. And so you're trying to avoid the bad things and only gravitate towards doing the things that enhance your stature with the person, with the customers. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So those are a couple, three,
very good.
Just come right off the tongue, and there's
great advice.
More.
Great advice. So as you're doing this now, the thing that comes to mind is you're not the only salesperson. I'm sure you're doing some sales in your business yet, but how is your sales tactics, and I shouldn't say tactics, not right, strategies and the things you do evolved as you're not only selling, but you've got a sales team that's working with you, that's working, doing their own stuff, helping them. How does that change?
Yeah. So, well, the one thing, if you're a sales manager, is you have to realize that, over time, some people won't be the right people. And you will have to cycle them in and cycle them out, right? And it's like hire slowly, fire quickly, right? Yeah. And people often ask me, well, when do I know when to fire someone? I'm having trouble with this guy, Bob, and da-da-da-da. And I said, let me ask you a question. Have you ever thought about parting ways with Bob and letting him go? And the guy's like, yeah. And I'm like, well, when was the first time, right? Oh, well, like 6 months ago, he started all getting off the rails. I go, that was the day. Yeah. That was the day you should have fired him. Right. Yeah. And he's like, no, what are you talking about? And I said, look, it never gets any better. It really never does. Right. And so you have to continuously hone your team, and they have to practice the core values of your business. And so not everyone asks for a mini tour like I do. Not everyone never sits in the lobby, but they have lots of top sales guys that, that have worked for me and stuff like that. And they might do it similar, slightly different or whatever. But overall, they have to meet the core values of the business, right? So whether it's, people first, customer matter, results matter, whatever the core values, you have to constantly be measuring your staff to the core values of the business. And if they're not, you have to have a core value call out and then give them a chance to say, look, we've got 4 core values. You're on track for 3 of them, but let's say, pleasantness or something, you're kind of grouchy at times, and that's a main core value. You have to be you got to get a positive check mark on that. It's a non-starter. You got to bring it in line. And if you don't, then what they end up doing is dragging down the rest of your team. Right. And so you need to take a long time to figure out what your core values are and hire a professional to help you develop them and go on a 1 or 2 day retreat and come up with the whole, get a large team to help develop them. And then you need to hire, fire, reward, motivate, and call out core values every minute of every day. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's huge. I mean, and it's easy to overlook that, but it's so critical because your core values really transcend people or business and everything else. It's just, and they're so good. And, you look at some of the people that have really worked on setting up like the EOS, the entrepreneurial operating system. They talk about that, the get it, want it, capacity to do it. We hire these people that have the capacity, but they don't get it or they don't want it. And you just hit all 3 of those when you look at, how are you doing with your core values compared to the core values we've laid out for the company? And a lot of times it's just, they're not the same kind of people that you want to have in your organization. They don't fit that.
Yeah.
That's simple.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it is, I like what you said earlier though, is you got to hire slowly and fire quickly because it doesn't get any better. As you said, It doesn't get any better if there's a core value problem, unless at that first point, like you said, you have a core value meeting, you talk about it, you say, here's where it's got to change. And unless there's an adjustment they make there and it works.
Yeah.
That's the only way.
And then in a more, more tactical sort of answer as well. Like, for instance, people are like, well, do you sort of like enforce things in your book on your people or whatever, right? So one of my rules, it's a funny one, right? It's called never ship the shit or fax the facts, right? And so, of course, I made up the rule in 1986 when we got our first fax machine, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, people are like, well, we don't use faxes anymore. I'm like, dude, never email the documents doesn't flow off the tongue like fax to fax, right?
Yeah.
And so, the name of the rules stays the same, but the medium of the message has changed, right?
Yes.
What I mean is I often talk to these guys, right? And I'm like, oh, what's going on with that, the Acme Accelerator deal, at with the government or whatever you're working on. Oh yeah, I'm working on that, right? And I'm like, what's going on with it? Like, oh well, yeah, we sent them a quote, and I said, did you drop it off? And they're like, no. And I'm like, well, how'd you get them the quote? They're like, well, we emailed it to them, right? And I go, and then did you follow up with them? And I said, well, yeah, I mean, I gave them a call, and I'm like, well, what did they say? And like, well, they didn't answer. I had to leave a voicemail, right? I'm like, oh, okay. And then I go, and then what happened, right? He goes, well, yeah, we're just waiting for the results, and stuff like that. And I'm so like, basically, so customer contacts us, we send him a quote, you email the quote, he doesn't reply, you phone him, he doesn't answer, you leave him a voicemail, he doesn't call you back. And I said, like, how does that sound to you? Right. And I'm like, dude, like when they say, now, of course, obviously you might have a huge territory. That's not always possible, but whenever possible, always hand deliver everything. That's the default. And you only deviate that because of time, distance, or space. Right. And, but if you can do it so the guy says, hey, blah, blah, blah. We're looking for these different things, but let's say he gets to the point where he wants a quote, right? You say, okay, well, fine. I can drop off a quote. As a matter of fact, I'm going to be in your area on Thursday. So why don't I drop it off? The guy's like, oh, I'm really busy. And I'm like, okay, well, why don't I'll just drop it off in the lobby for you. And he's like, okay, good. But I'm really busy. And I'm like, okay, no problem. So then I know I'm going to be, at whatever, Honeywell on Thursday morning. So I call everyone I know at Honeywell. And I say, oh, yeah, I'm meeting Jack on Thursday. We got this great proposal. He's just dying to have a look at our stuff. Can I get 5 minutes of your time? Oh, I'm really busy. Well, maybe you can just pop down to the lobby and see me when I'm there. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, fine. Blah, blah, blah. Let me know when you're in the lobby. Okay. Then I call Sally, right? No, I'm too busy. I'm off that day. Okay. Then I call Judy, right? And then now all of a sudden I got 4 people to see when I'm at Honeywell, right? I get to the lobby and the lady says to me, is Jack expecting you? And and they always have that tone to it, right? Is he expecting you? And I'm like, well, yeah, he's expecting me. And he asked for this quote. And she's like, oh, okay. And often I go on and, in the book about, because I'm Canadian, right? About donuts and Tim Horton donuts.
Yeah.
And, if it's before 10:30, bring donuts. Never bring donuts after 10:30. Why don't you bring donuts after 10:30? Because you just end up ruining the guy's lunch. Then he gets mad at you instead of being appreciative. It's a 8 a.m. to 10:30 thing. But if you show up at the thing, bring some donuts, right? The warm smell of donuts hitting that receptionist's face. She's happy to get on the phone and get Jack down to the lobby to meet you or whatever. And Jack forgot that he told you he was too busy, right? That was a week ago or 3 days ago. And he's thinking the guy's there. I'll go and get the quote. Right. And comes down to the lobby. You show him the quote. Then you practice my next rule. Always have something in your hand and something in your mind. Right. And so in that day, I have the quote in my hand and my mind. I want to know, what does he think of the price? How does it look? Et cetera, et cetera. It might be a brochure I'm showing him. It might be swag I'm giving him. It depends on what. I always have something in my hand. And I always have something in my mind that I want to talk to him about, right?
Yeah.
And so I give him the quote, and then, I said, hey, these Acme accelerators, I mean, these are going like hotcakes. Is there any way I get a little mini tour of where you're going to set it up, right? And again, we're kind of busy and and I don't want to bug the guys. And I'm like, hey, look, I won't sell them any encyclopedias. I just want to have a quick look around, see where it's going to go. He's like, oh, okay, fine. Right. Then I walk down, never forget a face. Sally, Bob, and George walk by. And he's like, holy shit. Right. And then I hit him up with, by the way, I've got appointments with Sally, Jack, Bob, Dave, Sam, and George. After this, can you drop me off at the next one's desk?
Yeah.
Right. And then it's like, it's 9 meetings while he's here. Holy shit. Who is this guy? Right. And then, but also some of the other rules that come into play. So I've dropped off the quote, right? And then maybe he wants a demo, or maybe he wants some kind of follow-up or whatever. Well, then what I say is, well, that's funny that you mentioned that, because guess where I'm going to be next Thursday? I'm back in your building visiting Judy, who's on leave today, but said she could see me the following Thursday.
Yeah.
And so why don't I follow up with you when I'm here? He goes, oh, I'm really busy. I'm like, well, look, I'll give you a call from the lobby and we'll see. And he forgets that he was busy and he comes down. Right.
Yeah.
And then, and again, same thing with the demo, right? They want a demo and they're like, just ship it to me. I go, no, it's company policy. We're not allowed to ship demos in. He's like, why not? He goes, we've got to make sure they're set up properly. Got to make sure that they're connected, that the user knows what he's doing. It's all liability, safety, et cetera, right? Okay, fine, no problem. Next Thursday, bring the demo, set it up, blah, blah, blah. And of course, I've called all the other people that day afterwards, so I filled up. So I'm never in my office trying to get meetings, right? Because I'm always setting them up in real time, right? I'm visiting everybody I can while I'm there. And while I'm there, all the follow-ups are already pre-scheduled. And because of those, I've got this momentum for, hey, I'm going to be in that area on Wednesday. I'm going to be in that area on Thursday. Can I drop by? And I just build on it so that I'm constantly moving everything through its cycle, right? But I drop off the demo, and I set it up, and now I can see who's the demos beside mine. What else is he looking at, right? And then I said, okay, well, how long do you need it for, right? And it doesn't matter what he says. Whenever answer he gives me, I divide it by 2, right? So he says, oh, I need it for at least a week. And I'm like, a week? I said, there's no way. This thing's way too busy. I said, no. It's scheduled right out. I can give you 3 days. That's the best I can do. If he says 2 weeks, I'll say, look, you can have it for a week. I said, but if it's here for a week, look, I'm back on Monday. I'd like to check in with your team, make sure it's going okay and you're getting good use of the unit, right? Because I'm not going to leave it for a week and find dust on the power knob when I come back a week later, to pick it up, right? Because I always come to pick it up too, right? And and then if for instance, and there's stories in the book about this where, let's say I come back 3 days later and they're not using it, right? I just take the demo. I'm just going to remove it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm going to go and find someone that wants to buy my shit.
Yeah. Cause it really is. I mean, there is an awful lot of buying, demoing, whatever, getting quotes that is just to make sure you got 2 or 3 units sitting there, 2 or 3 options.
So that comes to my next rule, right? Which is I'd rather be last than second, right? Because second is just the first loser, right?
Yeah.
And so by being last, what I do is I say, okay, I'm at whatever juncture of the sale, and I know that beyond a shadow of a doubt, I'm not getting the order. I just know. And of course, maybe you don't even know that until the last minute of the day of the quote of the whatever, but that's not usually the way it works. Usually, when you know that you're actually not the right fit, the right product, the right price, the right whatever. And at that exact instant in time, I figure out a nice way, because I'm always a pleasure to do business with, of pulling back all my resources. I need a demo. Oh, I'm sorry, my demo's tied up for a month. Well, we got to make a decision that, okay, well, I can give you some information. I can show you YouTube videos and whatever, but I don't have a demo. I got to get going. And by the way, I got to go because I got a meeting down the street at a company that wants to buy my stuff, right? And I pull myself away from the sale. And I know I'm sounding like a smart ass, but I'm very nice about it.
Yeah.
But I stop selling that guy. And what I do is I immediately race to the next possible customer, because the competitors are still there fighting over that deal. And I try to get to the next newest guy, and I want to get in pole position on that.
Yeah. That's a great point. Utilize your time well.
Exactly. Because, it takes just as long to come in last or second as it does. And first is the only one that gets paid.
Yeah.
Right. And so you need to value your time. And of course, you're not doing them any favors by, because a lot of people are like, oh, let's fly some engineers in from the plant and give them a tour of the plant and fly them to Raleigh, North Carolina, so we can see the factory, and the guy's like, well, I'd love to go there and I can catch a ball game and, whatever. But no, like, we're not doing that. We're not wasting the money on people that aren't going to buy, right? Yeah. Those are for people that are buying, and we reward the behaviors with those kind of things and that amount of support, right? And so, Yeah, so that's another.
That's good. That's because you're giving some great lessons here, and I love that you're sharing this with us. And wow, you're running through a lot of the questions I have, because some of this stuff you're just naturally addressing. Like when you talk about common challenges that sales professionals face in the field, I mean, you're hitting a lot of them here. Like, what do you do? I mean, good. This last one was awesome. If you're not winning, why are you wasting your time there anymore?
Exactly.
Go someplace else. If you're clearly got that other stuff, and figuring that out too, you laid out a couple of good tips there. See what they're testing, understanding, what really they're doing to make sure that you're a really good fit for something, because they may not know that you're a great fit, or they may not know that you're a marginal fit for something. So you may see it ahead of time and say, I can cut my losses now and make friends with everyone and walk down the road and find somebody that I'm a really good fit for.
Yeah. And then I'm not getting mad at the end because I wasted resources and I grumble and groan. And then the guy doesn't want to give me a shot because he's embarrassed to see me again. Right.
Yeah.
I want him wanting to call me back and to work with me, and,
Yeah. Because at that point, if you are actually a salesperson in the field, they're in there, they want to demo your products. And even you're talking about, you want to have this mini tour, and you suspect it. And then they continue and they say, okay, now we'd like to do the demo. And you're walking to help them set up the stuff in the demo. And you go, I'm going to tell you that we're probably not the best fit here.
Yeah, exactly.
How much respect would you have for that, from that person, that you stopped it right there, and you stopped wasting your time and you stopped wasting their time. And you can say, and this is why not, and this is where we really are. But I'm going to tell you, we don't need to continue here unless I missed something. And that's
exactly right.
That's so awesome, because like you said, I'm going to go down the street to somebody that does need the product.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other, you can't be in two places at one time, right?
Exactly.
Your demo can't be in two places at one time. You can't, so the other guy's all there. He can't be there. Right. And a lot of times, and so one of the other rules I love sharing with salespeople as well is like, at some point in time, you go into sales, and before that, you were not in sales, right? And so there's the before and the after, right? And so when you get into sales, you join a company, and you're going to early on, you're going to have an epiphany, and you're going to realize, hey, I work for the number 3 brand of whatever, right? Acme exasperators, you know what I mean? And so what do? Quit. You need to be working for number 1 or number 2, preferably number 1. Why, right? I'm like, because number 1 gets 80% of the business. Number 2 gets 80% of what's left. And you are fighting over the last 4% of business with 3, 4, and 5, right?
Yeah.
You're putting in all the effort. You're getting less than 4% of the business. Do not work for these sub brands. There's no leverage in it, even if it's a higher commission, even if it's a higher base. No, you want to be working with the best brands, because you can never replace when you're 25, when you're 26, 27. When those years are gone, they're gone.
Yes.
Right. And so why, and I mean, it's the whole never got fired for buying HP or for IBM or whatever the brand is, Xerox. And, we've all heard that kind of a thing. Right. But the thing is that you can still make bags of money working for those companies as a high producing salesperson, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have to sell the company, right? You can focus on selling the value in what you're selling. Most people are like, I've never heard of Acme, such and such. Who are you guys? And and so that's the worst thing, when you're selling who you are as a business before you can even talk about your product, right?
That's a great point. That's a great point.
And I've just noticed that people that work for the bigger brands, the better products, they do better, right? Yeah. And it's just my rule, and one that I always pass on, right?
Yeah.
So
awesome advice. Work for number 1 or number 2 in your industry, because the sub brands are working on the little bit that's left over after them, and it's a little bit. And that's for sure. So as you're talking about now, the title of the show of maximizing value before an exit, during an exit, you've obviously exited a couple businesses. What really can the role of a sales in an organization, how can it help the exit?
Okay. So there's just so many ways to go with this, but I'll just shout out some things, and you can ask me or stop me or guide me, so, and some of this stuff's not intuitive, right? So first of all, number 1 is like, people that are buying your business, they're going to pay more for recurring revenue than they will for repeat revenue versus one-off sales, right?
Yeah.
So that's the order of priority, right? So it's like, why do you hear about these billion-dollar brands that get bought with hardly any revenue or whatever? Well, maybe they have 100,000 users or something like that, right? And they know the way it rolls out, it becomes an Instagram or something like that. And the value of those recurring revenue customers is so much more, right? So, prioritize your revenue streams wherever possible, from recurring to repeat to, one-off, right? And so that's always very, very important, right? The other thing, they will pay significantly more when the margins are higher, right? Like you'd say, $100 million company, right? What's your gross margin? Well, we usually make between 9 and 11%. I'm like, okay, well, that sucks, right? Yeah. And then you've got this other company, which is a $40 million company, and it's a software business, and it's 80% gross margin. Yeah. Right? You go, and it's all licensed recurring revenue, right? Yeah. And, this guy's going to be making out like a bandit, right? And so if you can increase your gross margin, like when you're selling like equipment stuff, a lot of times you're buying, let's say you're John Deere, maybe you make 20 points or something on the stuff, but you're not going to be making 40 or 50 points selling $100,000 tractors. Right. Yeah. And so if you're selling in that world, 18, 22%, something like that. But if you can take 22 and make it 25, it makes a huge difference. Right.
Yes. Yes.
You need to be spending all your time before the sale of the business, long before they show up, increasing your margins. You need a history of improved margins, right?
Yes, that is huge. A history of improved margins up to the sale is just a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
It is a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And then you said a couple things too before this. The other thing is buyers have great information now, and they have better information oftentimes than the person selling the business, because they're having to loan, take out loans or whatever to buy these businesses, or they've got investors that are going to do it. And they'll spend a lot of money just understanding the industry beforehand. And when you talk about margins, one of the things that we see is, hey, I can have a business that I make good money in and I'm really happy, but the industry is making a higher margin than I am. That's a huge thing to a buyer. And that's a great thing that your sales team can help you work on up to that exit. And because if you're not at least hitting industry standard, you got to really need to be beating it. But if you're not at least at industry standard, they're going to see that right away, because they're going to, the bean counters are going to look at it and go, oh, industry standard is 17.7% and you're at 16.5. Well, we need to discount the value because it's not as good a business as that. It just happens. There's nothing you can do about that.
Nothing you can do about it.
So you got some awesome stuff here.
Yeah.
So
there's one golden nugget because I don't know which direction we're going to go. This is kind of the golden nugget of the show which is sort of what I call the lesson of operational efficiency. And so one would think, okay, well, we've been doing it the same way for 15 years. We're going to be selling the business. Why don't we upgrade all of our systems and get everything running like a Swiss watch, right? And one would think that would be the most intuitive thing that one would want to do. But it turns out that in the history of the purchases in the businesses that I bought and then been a part of the companies who bought me buying other businesses, that's not what's happened. It's the exact opposite. And what happens is it's the businesses that are on the cusp of having the ability to have increased operational efficiencies just before the purchase that gets the higher leverage, higher multiple. And what I mean, and sort of in layman's terms, is instead of spending all that time increasing the computer system or whatever, demonstrate that the computer system can be put in and you can increase your margins by 3%. And what ends up happening is the company realizes I can spend $100,000 after I buy the business, and I can show the investors that I increased the margins 3%. Boom, this guy gets some huge increase on his multiple. If you do the work first, they're not going to pay you for it. You're not getting your $100,000 back. You might get it as an add back on your EBITDA that year or whatever, big deal, but you're not going to get the benefit of a huge or higher multiple because your margins will be 3% higher. Demonstrate that you can improve the efficiencies when you buy the business easily. And then that's done through, automations that are on the cusp of happening. Maybe you've spent time increasing the management team. Maybe you've developed intellectual property that's getting ready to be unveiled and things like that, right? But if you do it all up front and give them this beautiful, wrapped and finished product or whatever, they're like, okay, well, it's an X amount of margin. It's this top line. It's this EBITDA. You're in this range. You get a 5.5 times multiple. There's your check. Have a nice day. X amount of earnout, X amount of, et cetera, et cetera. There's the deal. Go, Bob's your uncle. Whereas if some of those things you held back and they can get these wins for their investor stack in the private equity, you get a higher multiple for it.
Yeah. That's a great point. It's a great point. And some of our clients, when we're helping them, one of the things we do, if we're building a client that can be a platform company, a smaller platform company, we will actually have acquisitions lined up with LOIs just about ready to sign so that the new owners can come in and step in and sign those LOIs with those acquisitions and invest that money, because you are so much more valuable because they can walk in, like you said, invest another X gazillion bucks behind it right after that first purchase, doing what they do best, and that's deploy capital and let them make more money. So awesome stuff, Glenn. So much fun talking to you today. We are getting to the point that we need to wind down, but I do want to ask you couple quick questions. One is, if someone wants to talk to you about your book, or where can they find your book, first of all?
It's sold everywhere books are sold: Barnes and Noble, Amazon, all the bookstores. It's the ebook, audiobook, hardcover, softcover, every which way.
Never sit in the lobby. Awesome rule. Awesome book. You go from there. And if someone wants to talk to you more about sales coaching, about some sales question they might have, where's a good place to talk to you or contact you?
So you can definitely just myname.com is go to my website and you can reach out to me there, but you can also get me a lot, easy on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. I post a lot of content. I'm a LinkedIn top voice. So I'm very, very active on LinkedIn and happy to communicate with anyone that reaches out to me. So
nice.
Yeah.
Well, Glenn, thanks so much for being here today. And, talking about effective sales. First of all, I'm going to tell you, if you got into this thing late, you need to go back and listen to this entire thing, because Glenn just gave us a master class in about 49 minutes here on some of the best things you can do if you're selling equipment or other things into companies that take a bit of thought all the way through the process. Thanks for doing that. We're talking about effective sales, maximizing the sale before, during the exit. Another group of golden nuggets here at the end that really helps to think about what are the most valuable sales. How do you position your company better to get higher value? Just so many things in there. Thank you, Glenn, for being here today.
Thanks for having me. Great.
All right. Well,
here,
I just want to say thanks for everyone that was listening out there. If you want to go back to the beginning, you're going to be thankful that you did. Glenn, hang out for a moment. We'll finish up offline.
Awesome.